So as we continue in the study of Matthew, the book of Matthew, I would like to set it up by first saying that the Roman government operated from Rome itself, a city in Italy. It looks like a lady's boot here, as you probably know. The Roman government was set up from here, and they acquired, or they got, or they kind of conquered a huge part of the world. Not all of them, but most of the world were under what's called the Roman Empire, or at least the Mediterranean world here. When I say Mediterranean, it's because of the Mediterranean Sea. Terrain means land, and all this is land right here. This right in here, this part right here, and in between all this is the sea, the water. It's like a big sea. This is a land, as I'm kind of outlining it here, all the way here, down here. This is Africa here. This is Spain over here. And the Mediterranean world was conquered by territories of the Roman Empire. Rome was one bad, big, powerful nation right here. And they had one big, bad, powerful army, you know, really a lot. And they conquered Israel, and actually they came in this area. Did you notice this area right here, if you're familiar with it? Right here in this little tiny backwater type way out here territory, we have what's called Israel, now also called Palestine. But right in here is where Jesus walked and lived and everything. And so it's kind of in the outskirts, pretty far from Rome, way out here. And as you remember, we have the Sea of Galilee, we have the Jordan River, this is Lake Hula, and then comes up here to the Mount Hermon. There's mountains right up here. Then you have the River Jordan here, and then you have the Dead Sea, and this is Jerusalem, and this is where Jesus grew up, and all through here. I hope you can see all this. And so in 63 BC, so if I were to draw a timeline here, like this, and this is where Jesus ended up dying on the cross. He was born, he started his ministry right here. Can you see this? And then he was born right about here, which is about, well, it's really 4 or so, 6 to BC. I'll explain that some other time. All this time, way back here in the time of 63 BC, before Jesus was born, right here is when Rome conquered this land right here, Israel, down here. They conquered it, okay? They took over. And they were basically known as oppressors. They were conquerors. They took over the country. It's just like some country coming into our land or something and taking our nation, taking over our nation. And so what they did, as soon as they conquered them, they started getting money from them. Tributes or taxes, just like we have to do taxes. So the Roman government wanted money for their imperial coffers, imperial banks and everything. So what happened is, what they did, this is Rome, okay, here. What they did is they had what's called publicans, and they took Roman citizens and they distributed them. They went all over the empire, all over those territories there, and they set up what's called publicans. So like here, tons of them. So a publican is public service for Rome, and the publicans were actual Gentile Romans. They weren't Jewish. And then what they did, kind of conniving, scheming, and also sly, and kind of the way to get money, extract and get money from all their territories, including Israel, kind of a slick way of doing it, is they chose Jewish people. So the publicans, I believe, were Romans, okay, which are Gentiles, which is non-Jewish, anyone not Jewish, basically two types of people in the world. And then the publicans, let's say, I'll draw this one right here. The publicans would get higher. Actually, they would sell the right to what's called tax collectors. Okay, so and these people were Jewish, for example, in Israel. They were the Jewish tax collectors. So how they would do it is they'd go and say, like an auction, they would give bids they would sell the right to take taxes. And this is really, really sad here, because some of the Jewish people said, wow, I can make a lot of money off of that. And they got rich, most of these guys. So let's say we have a tax collector here. I'll put this down here. And then there's a tax collector there, a tax collector. And then that tax collector would get all the money in that town or village, or, there's many different taxes, which we'll get into in a second. I hope do you get this, what's happening here? So this is setting up our story, really a powerful story. And when you get a feel for this, it's like, wow. Now, the Jewish people did not like the tax collector. They just didn't like him. As a matter of fact, they kind of, a lot of people hated them, because these were taking money, and goods from their own people. And then they would take the taxes, the money, and the Jewish people would give them to what? The publicans right here. And the publicans would give it to the Roman people. And so Rome made a lot of money off of all the lands and the territories. So tax collectors, which is mentioned like, I don't know how many times, over and over and over. Jesus mentioned it. It's really, especially in the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, especially the 3 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, the synoptic Gospels. And so, wow, they did not like them. They were really mad at these tax collectors because of all the money that they were collecting. And now what's really sad is the tax collectors, what they could do is not only get all this money, for Rome, and it's probably about 30 to 40%, 30 to probably, as my understanding, as I've kind of studied this, 30, 40%. Like if you make $100, that means $30 to $40 would go to Rome, or it would go to the tax collectors and to the publicans and all. And this is, let's say, this is a possibility for Rome. I've heard it might be less than that, but anyway, maybe 15, 20. And then the tax collector, this is number one, that would go to Rome. And then the tax collector would take whatever he wanted. Now, I don't know of any actual sources and how much, but they could extort. Like they would take, and let's say they said, okay, I'm going to take 10, 15 more % of your money. So let's say there's $30 to $40 out of 100. Now I'm going to take another 10. That's about 40 to 50% of what you made. You worked really hard, and then you have to give that money to these tax collectors. And if you said, no, I don't want to give that money, then the tax collector would say, hey, Rome, they're not giving me the money, and then they would send soldiers, kind of like policemen, and they would go and throw them in jail, or they would get their money. They'd force them to pay for it. And so they were not liked. Tax collectors were, As a matter of fact, the tax collectors, if this is a Jewish community, here, this is a Jewish community of all these people, the tax collectors who were Jewish were actually counted outside of their membership. The tax collectors, TC here, were the tax collectors. And they were treated like Gentiles, like you're not a part of our family anymore. You are not Jewish. They would say, you're not Jewish. So that's how they treated them. So most of the time, the people who hated the tax collectors were the Jewish people. Most of the communities didn't like them. And they were scattered, like here's Israel here. They were scattered throughout Israel because the different taxes that they took had to be taken. And so, it was really terrible. So they were all over the place. They were dotted all over the place in the villages and all. And they would get taxes at the gates, at the roads, as you're entering into the land. There's 2 main places that, people would enter. Whoops, I just dropped all this money. Let me put this down. One is right here, Capernaum, which is what our story is going to be about. Another one is Jericho, because a road comes from Damascus down here, and it comes right here. And then I suppose as people were coming from the south, from way over here to the east, they would come. They would go through Jericho. These are main entrances to Israel. But tax collectors were all over. And again, they were hated by the people overall. And here's some of the taxes, if you're interested in this. Hope you're getting some. That's kind of interesting stuff. One is they would have a tax on the income or their crops, like corn, wheat, barley, or whatever. And then another tax, they would tax on sales when you're buying and selling stuff. Another tax was you have income, you have sales, you have a poll tax, which, you know, when they did census and taxes, there's several of those. It's supposed to be every 5 years, but it's only records of certain ones. Like in 6 AD, there's 38 AD, and then there's 6 AD, 36 BC before Christ, and then 6 AD, and then you have another one in 14 AD when Augustus came, or Tiberius came. So, and then different places, that's a poll tax where they do a census and taxes, which we'll find more about more about that in Luke when we get into Luke. And then another one was like you had to, if you're trading and selling things, or you're bringing your imports and exports and all that. So imports and exports is another one. Imports, exports, like you're bringing in, buying goods and selling goods. Another one is another one would be as you're entering a territory, like in that, like for example, this is the River Jordan, and then here's the Sea of Whoops, let's do it this way. It should be down more. The Sea of Galilee goes like this. And Capernaum was right here. We're going to get to this story in a little bit. And remember I said there's this major road that comes to this town. And right there, somewhere right in there, there was a tax booth, a little house or a hut or a booth set up. And then people would have to pay taxes if you're coming into that territory. So tax collectors, they wanted that money, and they took chances and risking being hated. Probably the only people that loved these tax collectors were other tax collectors, maybe, or maybe I would think maybe there could have been a competition there, but probably not, or their mothers. The tax collectors, their mothers hated them or something. Loved them, you know. But, you know, there's all these other, I'm trying to think of all of them. There's different ones. Imports, exports, poll, like this. Okay, I think I'm, you know, there. And then, by the way, there's a whole nother thing. I think there's another one if I could think of it. But, oh, I know. Yeah, 5. Land, your property, you know. You got taxed on your property. It's just like nowadays, by the way, you know. And then you have, there's 6, 7, 8. There's different ones here. Then you have religious taxes, like such as, well, just the whole category could be taxes, like temple tax, you know, and then tax on your tithe. You have the tithe that you did. And there's a tax on like the, what is that called? The half shekel, you know, tax and all. So there's all these taxes, a lot of money. So this is really sad that a lot of your money was going into the pockets of these tax collectors. Now that helps you understand what happened here. This is Capernaum, and this is the Sea of Galilee coming down here, and it comes over here. And then you have the river of Jordan, and Capernaum was right here. And somewhere real close to the shores, because Matthew, Mark, and Luke tells this very story. And Mark actually says that Jesus came out of Capernaum, and he went into near the shores. So probably somewhere in here was Matthew, you know, Matthew. Now, Luke and Mark mention him as Levi, and then later they mention him in the list of the apostles, which you're going to get to in a second. So you got to name a guy named Matthew, like, and that kind of gives the meaning of it is like gift of God and all. And his actual family name, and by the way, Jewish people had 2 or 3 names. Later you'll see as we get into it, Simon was also named what? Peter. Jesus named him Peter. And he also was Cephas. Okay, Cephas. So you have, you know, different names for different. Matthew was also named Levi. Pretty obvious here. Anyway, Matthew was a tax collector, and he was more of the one who, it sounds like the receipt of customs, where they were came from that road right in here, Damascus Road, and came in here, and he took taxes. Well, probably not just from there, but maybe for Capernaum and all that. Anyway, there you go. That kind of gives you an idea. And these people, again, were not liked. The people of Israel basically felt like they're like rats. These are the rats of our community. These are the mean, kind of dirty people. And they treated them like they were Gentiles, like I said, and they were treating them like they were ungodly and horrible. And most of them were, I think. And by the way, John the Baptist, and Luke, you'll find out when we get into that, the publicans, remember I say publicans, and then you have tax collectors. Some of them were coming to get baptized, and they asked, what should we do? And he said, don't exact more. Don't take more than what you're supposed to. And quit being like taking and filling your pockets with money. But they were they were like the skunks or the rats of the people. They stunk, and so they just kind of wanted to hang these people if they had a chance. They just wanted to take these awful tax collectors and destroy them. There's another story later of another tax collector. We have Matthew, and then we have Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector. So you have different levels and all. Anyway, with all that in mind, Jesus comes out of Capernaum, and then he runs into Matthew in his tax booth. He's in his place, and he's getting taxes from everyone, making money. And then Jesus looked at him. Now get this. I want another drum roll or something. There's a lot of drum rolls I'm going to do in the stories of the Bible because they're fantastic. And Jesus looks at Matthew, and he says two words. You know what those words are? Looks at him and he says this: follow me. That's shocking. Now he already has different disciples, who became apostles. Peter, his brother Andrew, you have James, you have John. And they're walking around, and suddenly there's Matthew, and Jesus comes up to him and says, follow me. That is amazing to the Jewish people. All the crowds are following him. All these people, and these disciples looked at, this is a guy who takes my money for my fishing business and all. And then I'm sure they just got a hush. They gasped, held their breath, like, he's calling him to be a follower like us, putting on an equal level. These guys are pigs and skunks and rats of the community. And Jesus turns to Matthew and he says, follow me. It's so powerful. See, once you understand this background that I was trying to share with you, you realize the significance, the shock, the astonishment that these guys had. What? You're asking him to become a follower like us, fishermen and all that? Wow. You know what Matthew did? Mark actually says he left everything. Like, he just left his booth and everything. He quit immediately. He no longer was a tax collector for the rest of his life. That's what I think, I gather. And he came and started following Jesus. Now think about the heart of this guy, the heart of Matthew. Like, his heart, think about what he was doing. He was very protective, probably very selfish. And he was hated, and he probably hated back. And he was rejected, and so he rejected others, and he didn't care. He was just making himself rich, having a lot of money, buy anything he wants, get whatever food and clothes he wants, and they had probably tons of outfits. He was rich. When those words hit his heart, follow me, that guy instantly was transformed. Because all of a sudden, what was the reaction of Matthew? It was this: me? You're asking me to follow you? Like, wow. He's being called by God through Jesus Christ unto God. And that means he's accepted and he's loved. And Matthew radically changed that day. And by the way, later on in his life, he gave his life for Jesus Christ. He died. I think there's different stories and legends of what happened, but one of them said he was crucified, just like Jesus was. He gave his life for Jesus. But what's just so stunning and so fantastic and fabulous is the love of God. Loves people. Take the lowest of the low, the rats of the community, and he changed him. He's no longer a rat. He became a really, really, really wonderful man of God. And he wrote the book of Matthew. Think about this. And it's in the Bible today. The radical love of Jesus. There's nothing more powerful than the love of God. The love of God. And so he gave his life for him. And the next story we're going to get to is very, very cool. I don't know if I want to tell it to you. I'm going to say it in case you don't happen to hear that one. Matthew made a big dinner, a big party, a big banquet, and he invited tons of people, and all the disciples were there, and Jesus was there, and the Pharisees saw it. You know, the Pharisees and the religious leaders of that day, and you'll see what they said about it. But he threw a big party and threw out tons. He spent tons of money, his money, and it was a big celebration for him. And he's like, probably a farewell, goodbye dinner, you know. And Matthew gave his heart and life and soul and body and everything for Jesus. My opinion is he probably gave a lot of money away. Lots. He probably gave it away. Now, Zacchaeus did. We'll get to that in Luke chapter 19 later, a lot later. But wow, what Zacchaeus did is like he was radically changed. Jesus reached out to him too. And he gave this big dinner and spent a lot of money on it and just was melted. His heart was radically changed. Now, I'll tell you, there's so much to say about this. I guess I could, keep talking and thinking about this, different things, but I'm going to say this. It should bring you much hope. It brings me much hope. That one is that if you feel unworthy, you don't deserve Jesus because you're bad or you're a bad kid or whatever, you've lied. It's so evil. Or various things you've done and all, and you don't really seek God much, you don't pray much and all that. Jesus says, follow me. And he wants you and he wants me. The call of God. Wow. And he responded to the call. The Bible says many are called, but few are chosen. He became a chosen one. And he not only became just a normal disciple, Jesus called him into the 12. He chose 12 apostles later. He was chosen into that special group. Behold, look at the wonderful love of God. It's just super wonderful and sweet. So you can be chosen, and he wants you, and he wants you to follow him, no matter what type of child you are, or teenager, or adult. You might be a rebel. He was a rebel. He chose to be that tax collector. And he bid, by the way, to buy the spot as tax collectors was very expensive, like gold, like 2 or 3 talents of gold, like thousands of dollars to become a tax collector. Because they know if I buy this bid, like, hey, who wants to be a tax collector? And they say, I'll pay 2 talents of gold. I'll pay 3 talents of gold. I'll pay 4. And whoever had the highest bidder in that area, you got it. And then you go make money like crazy. Well, there you go. Wonderful, wonderful, sweet story in the Bible of Jesus calling this guy. And so he followed him for the rest of his life. Will you make that choice also? Come to this wonderful, loving Savior and give your life to Jesus. Turn from your sins and your wickedness. Give your heart and life to him. Live for him. And of course you want to when you realize how wonderful he is, how sweet his love is. And then follow him for the rest of your life. Okay? Thank you for listening.